Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this final session of the Climate Friendly Climate Research Conference, which we've entitled Wrap Up, Results, Highlights and Next Steps. And we hope to go through all of those points on the agenda in the next hour and a half or so. We'll see how we go. This is the agenda. We're going to start with a few closing remarks by Sebastian, representing JPI Climate. Then I'm going to look back at some of the conference sessions briefly and some of the conference results. Then we'll have some video highlights on two of the main themes of the conference before going on to the closing discussion where we have a few questions. But I'd like to just get the chat kicked off with a question which we can be answering whilst we go along. What do you take away from the conference? Yeah, without further ado, Sebastian, I'll hand over to you for your remarks.
So, well, now you should know that my name is Sebastian Helgenberger, and I'm an Austrian member in the governing board of JPI Climate, which jointly with the Austrian Alliance of Sustainable Universities has provided the institutional framework of this fantastic conference. And JPI Climate is an international alliance of research funders from 15 European countries who are together interested in jointly fund research that supports society and that supports especially societal change agents in tackling the challenges of climate change. And to do so, and this might also be interesting to you, in October we have just launched an international research call on societal transformation in the face of climate change, as well as on climate change in the Russian Arctic. And this topic received quite some prominence lately in the news due to the Russian raid of the Greenpeace ship that protested against the issues that are around exploring and exploitation in the Arctic. So this is a quite controversial topic as well. And so this is also the question on climate change in the Arctic is also a topic in our current research call, and you can find that on our website if in case you're interested in that. So in JPI Climate, and that's why I also would like to stress this point, and that's why this is linked to this conference, our research policy and also our investments are driven by the insights that if research wants to contribute to a climate-friendly society, then research will have to be part of this change. Research will have to be part of this change. And we think that research can and should offer society positive role models and not negative ones. And important features of organizing our work in the research system, including the importance of international collaboration and exchange, lots of traveling, correspond to the conditions under which many of our colleagues in the business and the service sector work. And with the activity on climate-friendly climate research, we in JPI Climate, jointly with our colleagues from the Austrian Alliance of Sustainable Universities, decided to start to find innovative ways of organizing our work and our collaboration in a sustainable, climate-friendly way to inspire others to follow. And let me again emphasize that we consider this endeavor a continuously learning process. And we are well aware that we cannot change our operations overnight. And as I said earlier in the opening session, I assume that this is also true for many participants of this conference. But just like this virtual conference, we think it's a start and we think it's an important one. And yes, we already have some ideas in mind. What's next on our way towards a climate-friendly research system, and Adam later on in the session will share these ideas with us all. But before talking about the future, let us talk about today. We've learned during this conference that there are already many existing approaches at hand, and you can also have a look at the policy papers from the Climate-Friendly Climate Research Project that are also on our website. And these approaches not only help us considerably reduce the carbon footprint of our work, They also help us to save time, to make our work more family friendly, how also Helga Kolb in her opening remarks pointed out, and thereby we can all together increase the credibility and also the attractiveness of the research system. And I think that this conference and the tools that we have experienced throughout this week perfectly illustrates these new opportunities. We in JPI Climate, in fact, we have already made our best to integrate these opportunities that have been demonstrated by the Climate Friendly Climate Research Project in our current research call, which I talked about earlier. And if you like, you can have a look at the guidance document and the checklist on climate friendly climate research, which we have published together with the call, and which will be also taken into consideration by the reviewers when evaluating the research proposals. So we are looking very forward to continue working on this topic, and we're also looking forward to continue receiving your comments and your inputs, as we so delightfully did in the last couple of days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those words, Sebastian. And yeah, I think that's a nice piece of news regarding this this conference in particular, but the topic in general that these considerations have found their way into an EU-wide call. That's great news. Now, before I go on, does anyone have any remarks on Sebastian's words and/or questions about that or JPI Climate? No? Okay, well, I'm going to briefly go into the conference results and look back at the conference this week. Now, maybe a couple of numbers to start off with. Looking back, so at the conference we had 5 continents represented. We had around 60 different participants during the week. Now, this is obviously a very approximate number, but we have travel-related emissions of around 50 tons of CO2 saved by means of virtual rather than in-person participation. We had 11 different sessions, and we had a get-together in Second Life. Now, all in all, it's been a very a rather full, intense, but also very inspiring week. In terms of the content, yeah, well, we had a session. We started off with a session on the carbon footprint of research before going on to look at an institute which relies almost exclusively on virtual collaboration for its work. We had a session which looked at existing solutions to mitigate the carbon footprint of research in terms of research infrastructure and greening meetings. And then we had a look at overcoming personal and cultural barriers on the one hand and institutional barriers on the other to mitigating the carbon footprint of research. We had a webinar on webinars, and we had 2 sessions looking at different means of virtual collaboration and communication. On Wednesday evening, as I mentioned, we had a get-together in Second Life. Now, we had a session on integrating climate-friendly criteria into research calls, which ties into what Sebastian just mentioned. And we had colleagues from the Tyndall Centre in the UK looking at integrating innovative travel policies into a non-hierarchical organisation, and on the one hand the opportunities related to that, but obviously on the other hand some of the difficulties related to that as well. And finally, we also had a session on carbon offsetting and ways in which innovative approaches to that issue in particular and implementing truly sustainable projects can perhaps change the negative discourse surrounding carbon offsetting in a fundamental way. If I just move on to the next, so we've seen that the carbon footprint of research is significant and that it's on the rise. But there has also been a rapid increase in the availability of information on the carbon footprint of universities and other research institutes or funding institutions, which is hopefully going to pave the way for active and future reductions. We've also seen that there's a whole bunch of different solutions or ways of better managing these issues, like greening meetings when they take place, like meeting virtually and abstaining from, or not even so much abstaining from, but perhaps prioritizing which meetings we go to and when we go to them, looking at the way we travel to these meetings. Now, we've seen that there are many different virtual solutions ready available, and that there are also institutions working and using these tools in their day-to-day practices. Now, of course, there are also barriers to making our work more sustainable. There are issues such as time constraints and the fact that many of us have families from whom we don't want to be separated for too long. There are also institutional barriers such as cost constraints and lack of incentives to green our practices and missing support infrastructure. And there are cultural issues such as questions of status of attending meetings all over the world. We've discussed these things during the week. On the whole, what I take from this week is an entirely positive feeling, and I see that also from the comments in the chat of the possibilities which have arisen, are arising, and which will arise in future to make all of our work more sustainable. And perhaps speaking generally, I think there are two main themes which really sort of came out within the framework of this conference. And that is, on the one hand, making in-person meetings more sustainable, and on the other hand, meeting virtually. And what I'd like to do is invite you to join us in watching a short video which highlights some of the issues that came up this week within the context of those two themes. So if you just give me a moment to pull this across. Now, as David informed me earlier, the video needs around 2 megabyte download. So if anyone has a not so good internet connection, I've just posted the YouTube link for this video in the chat, where you can also watch it in YouTube in case watching it doesn't go so well. Anyone who is watching it in Adobe Connect, you can hit the full screen button at the top and see that slightly larger. And I'm just going to kick off with the video now.
So the Tyndall Centre's Radical Emission Reduction Conference, which is taking place in London in a few weeks' time. The conference is basically trying to get together ideas and practical solutions to delivering radical, rapid emission reductions. We've got about 36 speakers, 10 of whom will be speaking live via a web link. We're going to try and organise it so there's a live web streaming. It's going to be one way at the moment. The team that are involved in sorting out the conference are trying to work out a way of getting questions in live via Twitter, for example. So we're trying to put in practice some of the principles which will go into this travel emission strategy and really start to demonstrate what's possible.
I tried to categorize the connectivity depending on factors like duration, which we just asked you, maximum number of changes, or departure times and arrival times. And we found 4 categories. First one is called convenient, which lasts less than 12 hours. That's the classical direct connections. Maximum number of changes 0. And but longer, namely not more than 15 hours for acceptable connection, where at least 1 change is accepted. The committed connection lasts up to 18 hours, and 1, 2, or 3 changes are accepted. And some of you are in the voluntary connection, but there are even more than 3 changes and a duration of about more than 18 hours.
I just wanted to reply to the question that you asked, which was about what people would miss if conferences went completely virtual. And I always find, and a lot of you would probably agree, that the coffee breaks are very important to people, because that's where you make new contacts, and especially researchers, that's where they look for project partners, and where they exchange gossip and all that. So these things are quite important, and I just wanted to bring in one personal experience. I did attend the Planet Under Pressure conference a couple of years in London, and because a lot of people couldn't come to this, they basically organized local meetings. So you had an international conference, but the people who couldn't had met locally, so they would have this sort of coffee break experience, of course with a smaller circle of people, but still they would meet people from their fields and people who shared the same interests. So that one possible way of getting around the issue of not meeting in person.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so again, it's another thing that maybe universities could help to facilitate these sorts of local interactions, as well as longer, larger scale things.
Yeah, I think they'd be ideally placed, because you have, they would be able to provide facilities, but also you have a lot of people who work in a certain field that would probably be happy to meet with colleagues.
Yes, it's a different format than what a lot of people are accustomed to, but we, for the most part, have not had much trouble getting people to participate in these types of events. And the fact that we have these chat spaces, and thanks everyone for pasting comments and all that in the chat window, it makes actually in many ways a better conversation, a better event, because people can speak up even while the speaker is talking. And so we can have, often we've had robust conversations in the chat windows throughout the whole talk, and people will go off on a certain tangent and discuss different aspects of it without interrupting the flow of the talk. And I think that's great. I think that just makes for a more efficient, a more productive meeting.
So this is an app. Everybody can show his or her login by just dragging the pin to your application. So we've got Erica based in London, Adam Vienna.
But then another positive point in favor of online working, Mandy Schoenemann says, I'm pregnant and I'm not much able to travel, but I can participate now, so that's a big plus. So that's nice to hear as well. Thanks, Mandy.
I gotta add that to my list of positive side effects of online conferences. I'm afraid I haven't thought of that before.
And the people here which are sharing this session inward in Second Life perhaps already mentioned there is something different to a simple Adobe session like this Adobe session. And that's what I'm calling about. It's about the phenomena immersion.
And if you wonder, like many people coming, what are they doing with a PowerPoint slide shows? Virtual worlds already have such a thing as PowerPoint. I can show you this here. We got here the speaker podium, and when you look behind it, we have control center here. This control center is to control the things you see on the screen. Now here we have the preview in small, that's the icon of the Gifted Children Island, and this is on the big screen. And now I'm not allowed to use that, but if you are allowed and you have a presentation, you can switch the slides by pushing the buttons here. The third thing we have is that we can use normal websites. We got here a media on a prim. We have YouTube running here, and we have a song playing here. This song can be heard inside SL, inside Second Life, so everyone should hear the piano music here. So it is possible to use videos and websites on a screen during your presentation.
I was thinking that your point about the sort of professional need to attend conferences is an interesting one. I mean, there was no professional need to attend all these conferences even 20 or 30 years ago. So that's something that has really been brought about by the availability of easy and cheap and convenient travel. So it's certainly not something that is genuinely a professional need, although I certainly find that when I tell people that I choose not to fly, they say, oh, you know, is that career suicide? Well, I don't know yet. Maybe it is. I hope it's not. But we certainly need people to start thinking about these things. And if the general expectation, as you say, is that it's bad for your career not to be seen at these conferences, or even bad for the institution's reputation not to be seen at these conferences, then there's just no way you can get around that. So we have to tackle the root cause, which is these beliefs that you need to be at conferences.
Okay, so a few highlights of the conference there, and yeah, I think I'd like to just open up the floor, having shown a few of the highlights from some of the sessions here to some of the questions there. So we already had in the chat the question, what do you take away from the conference? But you know, as you see something like this, which is a room for learning, a room for experimenting, is always going to have its ups and downs. So please also your remarks, what do you take away? And what could have been done better? Also what went particularly well, what were difficulties experienced, and highlights. And please feel free to also just activate your microphone and verbalize any questions or comments you have on that, please. So just looking at the chat there, obviously there's quite a lot of yeah, seems that the webinar was a favorite of quite a number of people. Jan mentioned earlier, it's indeed nice to see the potential for online workshops and learn more about the overall carbon footprint of the research system and how to reduce it. And nice to see from Jacob, who is more motivated to pursue train travel and interested in pursuing multiple day online workshops. Well, great.
Hey, this is Jacob. I can add a little bit to that.
Please do, Jacob.
I thought it was really great the way you guys organized this meeting over the course of a whole week. We've discussed a lot of the benefits and trade-offs with online conferences versus in-person conferences. And some of the online conferences I've seen that have been all-day substitutes for in-person conferences have been literally all day, 6 to 8 hours. It can be very tiring, I think. And I really like the way that you guys had 2 to 3 hours a day over the course of the week. I think it made it much more digestible. we all got to get other work done during the week. But for me, it was a nice compromise where, for me, this conference occurs in the morning. I'd wake up every day and then think about, get my breakfast and then log on to the conference. And it was, in a way, like I was attending a conference. There was a regular activity every day, but it wasn't so overwhelming that I felt like my week had nothing other than the conference. We didn't get coffee breaks and such, but having it every day, I at least got to recognize all of your names and some of your faces. And so there was a little bit of I wouldn't call it social, but at least just the name face recognition that starts to occur when the meeting lasted for multiple days. So I thought that was really well done, and I would follow that model if I were organizing another online meeting, to make it shorter, 2 to 3 hour chunks over probably more days. I thought that was very useful.
Thank you for that comment, Jacob. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's kind of it's sort of difficult, isn't it? What kind of time frame? And I think it was Seth in his presentation on Monday also went into this issue of the time zones. And what I saw what was quite nice is when he showed this sort of map of the world during an online meeting, where obviously half of the map is dark. We had Debbie joining on I think 3 days it was from New Zealand, who was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Obviously that's a little difficult, but I think it's sort of nice that we've got it at the end of our day. Jacob, you've got it at the beginning of yours. That kind of works well. The question I think that arises for me out of that comment in particular is that you mentioned, Jacob, that sort of sitting in front of the computer all day is sort of very tiring. And indeed, I think that the level of concentration, particularly when one starts working with these kind of technologies that's required, is quite high. Can we, if you take your sort of classical, 3-4 day scientific conference with sessions going all the time, can we substitute those with online meetings? Or do we need to look at sort of slightly different formats like we've introduced it now? What are your thoughts on that? To Jacob and anyone else who may wish to chip in on that question.
Well, this is Jacob again. I don't know that it's really a substitute. I think it's a supplement. I was actually thinking about my own career. I think the most beneficial conference that I've been to was actually a 2.5-day workshop in Sweden, which, flying from the US, is very carbon intensive and probably not the best objective use of resources. But I made the best personal connections that could not have been made virtually. It was really because I was able to meet people that I'd emailed before, and they were fairly prominent in the field, so they're the kind of people that probably wouldn't respond to an email because they're just busy. So I think there is benefit to in-person conferences, but I think a lot of what we do can be done online, and maybe we can do less travel and then make our travel more worthwhile when we do fly.
Thanks for that. Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you. I was just asking myself why it is so tiring, or why it's perhaps more tiring than attending an online conference, a virtual conference, than a physical conference. And I came to a very positive answer. That is that when I'm attending a conference like this, I'm really completely concentrated and focusing on what's happening in the room and following the conversation, the chat. So receiving lots of information and also ideally also sharing lots of information. When I'm doing that in a physical meeting, this is also very tiring. But what happens if you look at your colleagues, neighbors, left and right of you in a physical meeting, is that most people after some time will start to check their emails, check their Facebook accounts or whatever, or just let their minds wander around. So, but if you really concentrate on the presentations in a physical meeting and try to follow what the ideas that have been presented, this is, I think, exhausting as well. So this is my very positive answer, that perhaps this way of conferencing more forces you to really concentrate on what's going on. somehow the screen it pulls your attention, which is very good. Whereas in a physical meeting, we're getting more and more used to distract ourselves on what's happening on the stage. So this is something I just throw in the room, and I'm happy for your ideas on that.
Very good point, thank you. Tobias has his hand raised, please.
Hi, Adam. Can you hear me? Very well. Okay. So what I'd like to stress is that apart from the financial and the ecological benefits, I think a real advantage of this kind of online conferencing is the interactivity that's happening. So with the chat, you can see what other people think without talking like you would do in a traditional conference. You can do polls, and you have this level of interactivity you really cannot have at traditional conferences. And I think this is a real advantage. Also, besides what I said, the ecological and the monetary issues.
Absolutely, I think we saw that in the highlights. That was something that Seth pointed to in his presentation as just being actually a massive benefit, and what I've really enjoyed, and what I as one of actually thinking about the sort of highlights, it's interesting. It's one of the really highlights for me has been this experience with the chat. Now, it may sound sort of interesting or strange saying that, but I think it's really been a revelation for me. The amount of and very intensive and filled with interesting content discussions that have been going on in the chat have been this week have really been great. So I take that away, certainly.
Adam, I'll add to that that I've been in Adobe Connect meetings where there's been a lot going on in the chat, but the moderator has not read what was going on there, and so the chat is a bit disconnected from the meeting. So that's something you did really well, and the organizers of this meeting, you were very aware of what was going on in the chat and tying it into the discussion. Because sometimes that can be a drawback. I've been in meetings where there's a lot of interesting things going on in the chat, and then it lags behind the actual discussion, and then many people have voiced opinions in the chat that never really get made in the broader meeting because it's all people talking. So that can be a pro or a con, but I think in this meeting it was definitely a pro.
Well, thanks for that comment. I mean, I had a sort of a side chat with Erica on one of the days where we were sort of saying, mentioning to each other, that it is it's kind of interesting when you're doing this, not for the first time, but you're sort of relative to it, but really all of the things you need to be keeping an eye on, and I think all moderators, all chairs this week did their best to really sort of tie that in. I mean, I think one of the things which also helps there is it really, in part, sort of substitute. So it was very much kind of the focus on the chat a lot of the time, which sort of aided that. And by the way, maybe a hello to Carolina there. Good afternoon. Now, something Erica mentioned, so for me, the issue that Inga mentioned the other day, that people around you do not realize you're attending a conference when you're sitting in front of the computer. I think it was Mandy who made that point, but yeah, I think that's something, and that's just that's going to be part of this I don't know, change of culture, or sort of actually adapting our culture to to making our colleagues and people around us aware of the fact that yes, we are actually we are in a conference, and we need the room and space to concentrate.
Adam and me, we have been talking about the socializing issue earlier today. Can you hear me? Is the microphone working? Okay, excellent. So, and we were thinking, what is the difference between socializing in a virtual world and socializing at a physical meeting? And of course, it's the physical presence of other people in the room, and this, of course, makes a big difference. But another important aspect is, of course, that in a virtual meeting, it is you that have to bring your own beer, whereas in the conference there are others that are serving you and providing you with the wine and the food. And what we thought was perhaps a change of the culture also in this online conferencing is, of course, that it's when it's about socializing and having beer together, it's then a bring your own culture. And I'm very happy that Adam has already put 2 cans of beer in the fridge. So later on we can actually hang around in the lounge of this conference room and perhaps have a beer together in case you also have a beer in the fridge. So this is this might sound funny now, but I think that's also a change of culture. And we can actually hang around together later on, see ourselves chatting and also having fun together. So that's the idea that we developed.
Just like to mention that they're bottles of beer, not cans, and it is, of course, also organic beer. Just to make that point, and I think it's yeah. So Erica mentioned, I think that's a very good point. On the one hand, the chat allows people to make points that they may not have made if they had to actually raise their hand and stand up. And David said yes, the chat has a lower threshold than actually standing up to speak. And what I think is sort of nice about that is, I think people, it's a lower threshold, but sort of when referring to thresholds, people have different thresholds. So obviously, you have some people who stand up all the time, and other people who are perhaps a little more timid or whatever, and might sort of not like the attention of standing up in a room of 50, 100, or maybe even 1,000 people to raise a question, and that gives them the chance to participate. So I'm seeing more and more benefits, but I'd like to, because I think to really go into that point that Sebastian made just now, and I'd really ask you to chime in on this question of as we had it in the video. Inga mentioned the sort of the coffee break experience, and as it's Friday late afternoon and we've had a long week, calling it the beer experience. I think Erica mentioned the chats one has in the pub afterwards, after a day at the conference. So maybe the question in that context, and sort of related, Sebastian, you mentioned this kind of issue of, on the one hand, obviously you need to get the coffee or the beer yourself, but also this issue of physical presence. And the question is if we do our sort of very best to recreate that situation, but have it virtually, can we, not entirely, but at least for the framework of these online conferences, substitute or somehow try and recreate that coffee break or pub moment? Chat or hands, or just jump to the mic if you have something to add to that, please. So, David, you said it's an important question and one that has to remain unanswered. I don't know. Do we need to introduce?
Okay, I wanted to. I would like to clarify. It doesn't have to remain unanswered, but we should try to answer this question. And I think for today we will not find the answer to how to substitute coffee. But I think we should try somehow to find a way.
So obviously one suggestion which I also find interesting, which came across in the video highlights, was again, you know, the point made by Inga. So if there is a conference going on somewhere and it has a live stream, then get together at your local university with colleagues, get the live stream. On the whole, they're pretty good live streams these days, and try and recreate a small conference atmosphere with colleagues there. That's maybe sort of a step in the right direction where we can start doing that. I think another thing, and this is something Sebastian and I talked about earlier, is this cultural or status issue of the kind of the being seen at conferences. Now, sort of one of the this sort of on the one hand we have the kind of the issue of conference tourism, but then also, and probably somehow related, yeah, this very much, one isn't someone in the scientific world unless one turns up at the annual meeting of whoever and lots of them, and then related conferences as well. The more the merrier, and so on. And so another thing, and maybe I think this is another question maybe. Would it make a difference if some of these large meetings, I mean, I don't know whether the American Geoscience Union of 25,000 people is quite ready for this yet, but maybe the game changer, if you like, would be if one of these big conferences actually decided for 1 year not to do an in-person meeting, but to do an online conference, and then suddenly sort of you would turn it around, and it would actually, being seen at the online conference, and maybe that would be a way of changing culture. I don't know, there's the sort of thought there. Your comments on that?
I think it's not only about really big, huge conferences, and obviously it will be a bit more difficult to have a online meeting with 25,000 scientists or so, but it's also about smaller meetings. I think most of the meeting and workshops we are all attending have around, I don't know, 20, 30 participants, not more. And I just remembered what a colleague of mine told me last week, that he attended a conference in an international workshop in Vienna on also climate change, and just 2 weeks earlier, the same bunch of people that met in Vienna had met in the Netherlands, and talking about basically the same issues. So which left us wondering why people went there, because there were no new ideas. But obviously, this might have to do with the fact that that is to be seen. So if you miss a workshop, even though you're talking about the same thing, this might be considered then an issue. So without let's say evaluating this kind of meeting, obviously virtual meetings would be an option to substitute these meetings, and then if there would be then a change also of culture, it might turn out that in 2, 3, or 5 years, there's also some peer pressure to be present at these virtual workshops. So you would have then a look at the participants list and wondering your colleagues from the US or India are not there, even though they are experts in this field. So I could assume that this peer pressure that so far seems to exist for physical meetings might then also be true for virtual meetings.
Yes, absolutely. Moving peer pressure over to virtual meetings, that would be one way. So I think there was quite a lot of comment on that. Small satellite meetings. Erica's going to be doing that for a conference in San Francisco next month. I think that's certainly, before we, really sort of have a paradigm change, which is obviously not going to happen tomorrow or in fact probably next year. That's certainly something which I think we can do, and we can continue also suggesting to colleagues and maybe start organizing these things at our home universities and really start initiating the change there. So obviously David mentioned, and that's maybe I think an interesting point. David says all short online conferences during the year. So rather than having this sort of week, which is obviously again also a huge chunk out of the working time of a scientist, to really just break that down and have the meetings more often and maybe then specify them thematically and so on. I think that could be a good idea. And coming to Erica's question, we must remember that they, i.e. the AGU, make a huge amount of money from registration fees. Sure, but I think, and maybe the question, because I'm not sure of this, Jacob attended virtually. Jacob, did it cost anything to attend virtually? And what are your thoughts generally, if we had this movement toward online conferences, of charging registration fees to virtual participants? I don't know. I don't think it's so far-fetched. And maybe to supplement that with Jacob's comment that he had a very good experience attending AGU virtually, and they had the opportunity to ask questions via chat in real time. I mean, Planet Under Pressure, which has been mentioned a couple of times this week, the questions were taken over Twitter and email and SMS. So I think that essentially allows pretty much anyone, gives anyone the opportunity to ask questions. So I think that a lot of the possibilities, a lot of the technologies that we need are there already, right? Okay, so Jacob says attending AGU virtually is free. So maybe that would be something. That something one would need to think about to start charging for virtual participation, but make it considerably cheaper. I think one of the questions which Sebastian and I also discussed earlier was this. I mean, we had a few people this week who can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Sorry, Sebastian just mentioned he couldn't hear me, but it seems to be I seem to be back on now. Yeah, so this sort of the question we had. So during this week, we had quite a number of, say, regular followers who came to most of the sessions, but obviously a lot of people who dipped in and out and maybe went to sort of one or two sessions, which means obviously you have a lot of sort of very fluctuating participation. Maybe the question that if you were paying to attend the online meeting, even if it was obviously of an order of magnitude less than actually the fee for visiting it in person, would that also make people, or not make people, but sort of provide an incentive or a motivation to actually attend more of the sessions? I don't know.
What Carolina is saying is that there are a couple of further motives to meeting in person. So not only the to be seen pressure, but also that you use the opportunity if you're at one place to for other side events, for strategic meetings and so on. And well, this is very, if I compare that with my experience, that's very true, of course. And I think it's important that, in fact, if you're making the effort to attending a meeting physically and also to all this traveling, that you take the best of it, so that you not only go to a conference, but then, of course, meet other people, have side events and so on. But I was just wondering, also Carolina, if you think of that from a perspective of virtual communication, you could have these side events, of course, every day, because you could just meet virtually with these people anyway. So I agree that that it's good to use the opportunity to meet when you're at place, but basically a new virtual meeting culture could also lead in a direction where you would have then more or frequent face-to-face meetings, even though virtually, which could then also substitute some of these side events of these conferences.
I think that's absolutely seems to be the crux, if you like, of the issue: recreating this informal experience, this sort of meeting on the side, and so on, and yeah, this is an interesting question. I mean, we had the lounge next to the conference meeting here, where people could meet, and I think we just need to carry on sort of working on and experimenting these kind of issues and these possibilities to see where it takes us. Jacob writes, yeah, he would be willing to pay, but only a fraction of the on-site fee. But I think that's fine, sure. For the online fee, you get an awful lot more. So I think, as I said, an order of magnitude less for the online participation, but at least you sort of incentivize participation rather than, people, if it's free, they might just drop in for a few minutes and then, and then log out for the rest of the week. So, yeah, thanks very much for being around, and yeah, maybe we'll see you around in Vienna. As just mentioned, challenging the culture would mean challenging our motives and behaviors. Yeah, that's true, and I think that is what we need to be. One of the things we need to be looking at in the highlights video, which I think you came after. You can see it on YouTube. The last little sort of section which we played was a comment from Erica, and Erica, please feel free to chip in on this one again, of the point that 30-40 years ago, before the age of sort of really truly globalized travel, cheap air tickets and so on, there wasn't that issue of constantly attending conferences, and it's there now. So if it wasn't there before, surely we can go back to a situation where where it doesn't need to be there, or it doesn't need to be there at the same level as it is now.
Earlier, I wrote in the chat that one of the highlights for me was session 6 on with the webinar experts. And one thing that I learned there was that virtual conferences offer the opportunity to link up with other parallel events that are going on. Because what we had there is it was a combined session of this conference, of the Climate Friendly Research Conference, with a workshop conference series on webinars that has been organized by a consortium with David, as well as also colleagues from Sweden. And I thought this was a very, very good way of organizing events. That means if we're organizing a conference on a specific topic, there might be one day where you want to bring in different community that is working on similar fields, but wouldn't attend your whole conference. You just have a joint session. And I think session number 6 of this conference is an excellent example for that.
So Erica says, and I think Carolina, that is part of why it is so difficult, suggesting virtual meetings is seen as a criticism of other people's behavior. Do you think it is, Erica? Maybe do you want to expand on that maybe a little?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. I just sometimes if you say, oh, why don't we do virtually, or why don't, why can't we participate in something via web streaming rather than having to actually go there, people sort of become a little bit defensive about it and wonder why, whether that's a criticism of all their other behaviors, which is probably a good thing, because if it gets people thinking about their other behaviors and making those connections, then that's probably quite positive. But if people retreat into being defensive about it and sort of going, no, of course, we have to do this, or there are all these other reasons, then you end up sort of taking the conversation in a slightly difficult way.
Yeah, I think all of these kind of aspects, one has to be very careful also of sort of not not jumping on the moral high ground or pointing one's finger, and really just try and communicate these things in a positive way. I think that's really very important. It's difficult when to always obviously keep an eye on that. We're all only human, and yeah. But yeah, absolutely. Any more comments on that or on anything else? And as I mentioned before, feel free, as we're on the slide there. We've talked about a lot of the highlights, and I think that's also great. But if there's anything where you say that really could have been done better, or to formulate it positively, we'll do that sort of next time. Then feel free to chip in with anything there as well. Carolina, the conference in Australia, was the whole conference online, or was that individual sessions? And yeah, Erica, I'm not sure when next time is quite yet. First of all, I need a weekend and a long sleep after this week. It's been fairly intense, but I guarantee that there will be a next time. But we'll come to yeah, to further collaboration a little later on. Yeah, so Bernard's raised the issue of promotion. Did we hit the target groups? It's a good question. I mean, we promoted it via JPI Climate, who also promoted the conference amongst national stakeholders. It went out over various mailing lists, Climate L and so on. Was promoted fairly widely in Austria. I think, to be honest, I mean, one of the best points on Wednesday, we had 60, 70 people there. Yeah, obviously, it would have been nice to have more people here at times, but bearing in mind we're experimenting here, a lot of the time I was pretty happy with the participation, and also with the fact that we had really active participants and lots of people involved. Sebastian.
Yes, thank you, Bernhard, for bringing up also the question of participation. And I was just thinking, one difference to physical meeting is also perhaps the reliability of participation. Because if I'm going to a physical meeting, I need to book. I need not only to register for the meeting, and you could do that for a virtual meeting as well. I have to do that in advance, but also I book my trip, my ticket, several weeks in advance. So, and then I have paid 200 euros for the ticket, and then I will use that ticket and be at the conference. Whereas one very positive effect or characteristic of this kind of meeting is, of course, that there's no travel, no cost for travel. But that means that you can also decide very spontaneously whether you will attend or not. And I think this is an issue to work on, because it's important that that you can rely on a participation. You can rely that the registered people will attend the conference. So you can plan also whether you have 10, 50 or 100 persons in a session, because this is also what I learned during this conference. It makes a difference how you moderate and facilitate the session. Now we are communicating differently with the number of persons we have now than if we have 100 persons in the room. I think this reliability issue of participation is one issue where we need to discuss, and so for the next climate-friendly climate research virtual conference, I think we have some ideas on that.
And Sebastian, Tobias has asked the question, can you say something about the potential impact of the climate-friendly climate research project and this conference within
Yes, of course. Well, as I said earlier, the topic of climate-friendly climate research is being discussed in JPI, and as I also said earlier, in our current research call, there's a specific set of criteria also for evaluating the research proposals on climate-friendly climate research. So researchers are called to develop innovative climate-friendly approaches to lead their projects. And I think this is a quite far-reaching and innovative thing, that is not only a mere guidance, so please do this, do that, but really we're asking our reviewers to have a keen eye on that. So, but of course, as I said, the call has been published and the criteria have been developed earlier. However, based on the results of the climate-friendly climate research project, and the results of this conference certainly will help us to develop these criteria in our guidance document further, and also to spread the word, because I assume that many of our colleagues will also have a look at the recorded sessions, because they offer a really valuable resource to learn about the problem, let's say the carbon footprint of research system, existing solutions, the feasibility assessment, and so on. So yes, this conference definitely will have an impact, and hopefully not only on JPI Climate, because also other joint programming initiatives in Europe are also working with or are also following the sustainability principle, so to make the research that they are funding more environmental and climate friendly. So this is what I would expect that also other initiatives, and hopefully also beyond, also the Horizon 2020 in the European research area, will take up the results of this conference.
Thank you, Sebastian. And well, nice to hear that it's already having an impact. And yeah, we'll hope that's the first step, and that it'll continue to have an impact, and it really becomes part of our day-to-day research activities. Now, I'd like to just sort of ask whether there are any more comments or questions from your side. Then I think we'll start wrapping up this this final session, and just gonna go on. So we've discussed the future there. I'm gonna just a few people who we need to say thanks to, who our thanks goes out to. First and foremost, our funding partner, the Austrian Federal Ministry of Science and Research. And what I'd like to say in the direction of the ministry, apart from obviously the sort of usual thanks for funding a project like this, is what I find really very motivating is the fact that they the ministry had their eyes open for something really quite innovative. This is very much a pilot project. It's the first project. It's very much the beginning of all of this, and I think it was it's also a risk for a ministry to fund something like this. It's not the sort of the usual kind of thing they fund, and so yeah, a very big thank you to the ministry. Also a thank you to our media partner, the Climate Change Center Austria. Our thanks obviously goes to the collaboration partner, JPI Climate. It should also be said that the funding for the project from the Austrian ministry was given within the context of JPI Climate, where a lot of these thoughts and these activities are taking place. Our thanks also goes to our collaboration partner, the Austrian Alliance of Sustainable Universities, within which context this project and this conference took place. The universities themselves are listed there. The ones in bold are the active project partners. And although I think Dominic's not online right now, I'd also like to take this opportunity specifically to say a big thanks and a big well done to everyone who's actively involved in the project at the universities, which are marked there, and go through. That's Bernhard Zagel from the University of Salzburg, David Rötler, who is a partner from the University of Salzburg, Tobias Kirchhoff from the Vienna University of Economics and Business, Günther Getzinger from the University of Klagenfurt, and our colleague Dominic, who wasn't able to make it today, but he's been here all week, Dominic Schmitz from the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences here in Vienna. It's been great working together with you this year. It's been great doing this project, this conference with you this week. I've really enjoyed it. And last but not least, finally, I'd just like to sort of leave us with this this one slide. As I said, climate-friendly climate research was a pilot project. Actually, before I go into that, one more thing. There is quite apart from everyone who participated, the audience themselves, and all of our external presenters, such as Ruth from the University of Manchester, and Seth from New York. I'd also like to say a big thanks to Erica Thompson from the London School of Economics, who, yeah, on the one hand, which is also a nice anecdote, motivated a lot of these activities with really a fantastic article she wrote on this issue, which is great food for thought. And or maybe Erica, you want to just post a link there in the chat. If not, I'll do that afterwards. And also, for chairing some of the sessions this week, for all of your input. big thank you to Erica, and yeah, I look forward to future collaborations that are going to come up. And so now, just to go back to this this final slide. So climate-friendly climate research 2.0, as I said, this was a pilot project which we did this year. I think a project which is shown through this conference, and also through the fact that we've made it, we've managed to integrate a lot of the stuff we've worked on into this first JPI research call. It's been very, very successful. It was a platform for learning and experimentation, and we've had discussions on where we could take it from here. And yeah, so where is the future? Maybe an EU project where we can really start tackling some of the larger issues. On the one hand, really, you know, sort of getting the European Commission involved, the European research area, and the issues of virtual conferencing. Another topic which has sort of come up a lot, which Gunther, I think, has raised a few times this week, is this issue that a lot of the questions we're dealing with are structural. Sort of, for example, the issue of, you know, trains versus planes, the fact, you know, that it's difficult to, apart from the cost, you know, to get a train ticket across several European countries, and we need to really start working on those kind of structural issues, you know, to further facilitate really climate-friendly collaboration. And yeah, these are issues we'd very much like to work on. The slide is just going to stay there. Please feel free to join us, and if anyone has any ideas or suggestions on that, then we'll leave the floor open for just a minute for anyone who wants to chip in on that. And just to go to the chat briefly. I mean, I mentioned David specifically at the beginning, and I mentioned him again now, but I think it's definitely yeah, very important to mention all the great work that David's done this week. David, maybe you want to just briefly turn your camera on and give us a wave.
Thank you all very much.
So
for this very good collaboration. I liked it.
Yeah, thanks for yeah, for being the mastermind behind this conference and having worked so smoothly. Yes, so obviously ideas, suggestions, we're welcome to take any of them via email. You can get in touch with any of us. You find contact details on the website. And yeah, we look forward to collaborating with you all on these issues in future. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you all soon.
Thanks a lot, Adam, also to you. You couldn't thank yourself, obviously, but you did a really, really good job. And thank you for facilitating this whole thing. It was really a pleasure working with you, and you did a really good job.
Thanks, Tobias.